The number 7 has always intrigued humanity. It's no wonder that, in the Bible, it emerges as a sacred code, filled with perfection and completeness. Imagine yourself sitting with a warm cup of coffee, pondering, why 7? Why does this number seem chosen to represent the divine? In numerous biblical passages, 7 jumps out, almost as a silent reminder that there is something greater, perfect, transcending the simplicity of numbers. Every time we encounter the number 7, it's as if we're looking at a piece carefully set in the celestial puzzle. Everything about it points to something complete, something fulfilled with a sense of accomplishment. To understand it better, let's think about daily life. Our weekly cycle has 7 days, a universal structure, almost immutable. In a way, this also tells us about how 7 structures our sense of time and order. Just as in the Bible, where creation is finalized in 7 days, our weeks seem to imply that, at the end of each cycle, we should renew ourselves. Like life cycles, the number 7 represents a journey of achievement, a cycle that does not close without leaving its mark. The mark of 7 is everywhere, but sometimes it goes unnoticed. In biblical numerology, 7 also represents what is sacred, the fulfillment of promises. Each time we come across it, we're subtly reminded of a perfect balance, a combination of the earthly and the spiritual. So, when we read about 7 in the Bible, it's like God giving a subtle wink, saying, here's something complete. Nothing is there by accident. And this number invites us to reflect on what it truly means to achieve perfection. Another curious point is that 7 not only symbolizes completion, but also renewal. After a complete cycle, as in Genesis, the number 7 closes creation but opens the doors to existence. In our days, we can imagine that 7 is also a transition point, that moment when we take a deep breath to face a new phase. Thus, understanding 7 helps us see that life offers us cycles to close and begin, in constant transformation. We can't forget that the number 7 appears repeatedly at crucial moments. In the 7 seals of Revelation, the 7 trumpets, the 7 days of Israel's religious festivals, and so on. Each time we encounter these 7s, we're prompted to ponder, what does this mean for the final purpose? What was God saying by repeating this sequence in different contexts? It may seem complex, but it's an invitation to see the bigger picture, to understand the message behind the events. The number 7 directs us to this reflection, asking us to look beyond the surface. So, if we look closely, 7 is more than a number. It's a divine reminder that our journey is marked by cycles that close and begin, advancing with a purpose. And the more we explore these meanings, the more we realize that there's a pattern, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, is by chance. Behind the symbolism of 7, we find a concept that opens up to profound mysteries, much like the very rhythm of life. Creation in 7 days, Genesis. The story of creation, as told in Genesis, is one of the most iconic examples of the number 7. In 6 days, God created the heavens, the earth, the waters, light, creatures, and humanity. On the 7th day, he rested, completing a perfect cycle. This 7th day is not just a rest, it's a symbol of satisfaction, of contemplating a work that has reached its purpose. Here, the number 7 acts as a divine seal of completion. It is done, that concludes the rhythm of creation. Isn't it curious that, for us, the week still ends at this point? It's as if that original cycle continues to mark our own days. Now, think about how this 7-day cycle reflects modern life. Every Sunday is theoretically a day of rest, a time to recharge, reflect, and find peace. It's like a reminder that, although work and creation have their place, rest and reflection are also essential for balance. God didn't need rest, but by resting, he teaches us something vital. Creation also requires a moment of pause. In a world of frantic work, it's comforting to remember that the Creator himself chose this structure. Throughout the Bible, the 7th day appears as a reference to holiness and separation. The concept of the Sabbath, or Shabbat, is really an invitation for humanity to look at life with calmness, gratitude, and awareness. Just as God looked at his creation, The Sabbath is a chance to look at our own achievements and, yes, our challenges too, and to recognize how we're following our own cycles of growth. Rest is not passivity. It's an essential part of the cycle. If we think about it, the number 7 in creation serves as a model for any human process. From small personal projects to great achievements, the creation in 7 days shows that each stage has its importance. First comes planning, light, then structure, heavens and earth, until we reach rest, completion, appreciation of what has been done. It's the cycle that closes and prepares the way for new beginnings. The 7 in creation shows that even the greatest creator knew everything has its right time to shine. More than that, the number 7 reinforces that life is not only about productivity, but also about a balance between action and reflection. Imagine a routine where we never have a pause to observe what we've created, where we never stop to think about our accomplishments. The number 7 reminds us, every Sunday, that the value of an achievement also lies in appreciation. After all, life cannot only be made of weekdays. It needs moments of breath, of celebration. Therefore, when we look at Genesis's creation cycle, the 7 makes it clear that each stage is necessary and that perfection does not rush or skip processes. In each of these 7 days, there is an implied teaching for us. Creation is a continuous movement that knows how to respect its own rhythms. And as 7 teaches us, there is no complete creation without taking the proper time to reflect and, perhaps, to dream of what's to come. The 7 sacred feasts of Israel. Throughout the Old Testament, we find a series of festivals that curiously follow the cycle of the number 7. The 7 sacred feasts of Israel mark specific moments of celebration and reflection. They're not just rituals, but deep acts of devotion that follow the divine pattern of completeness. Each feast, like Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, is intrinsically linked to the story of liberation and provision. These special days act as a holy pause in the lives of the Israelites, a chance to remember who they are and where they came from. In this context, the number 7 reinforces the sense of a complete cycle of celebration and renewal. These feasts are much more than days of rest. They are living memories, recalling God's acts throughout history, such as the liberation from Egypt and arrival in the Promised Land. Think about it. What would it be like to have dedicated moments not only to commemorate, but to relive these stories of faith? The 7 acts here as a sacred marker of time, reminding the people of Israel that their story is intertwined with cycles of overcoming and renewal. Each festival is like a stopping point along the way, to remember that God is present and active. And these feasts go beyond historical events. They also symbolize God's greater plan, pointing to the Messiah and the fulfillment of divine promises. Every 7 years, for example, the Sabbath year was celebrated, where the land rested and debts were forgiven. Thus, the number 7 reveals itself as a sign of liberation and renewal, a reminder that, like the land, we all need pauses to regain strength. The Jubilee year, which took place every 49 years, 7 times 7, is a perfect example of this restoration cycle. It's interesting to see that, in the symbolism of the feasts, 7 creates a cycle where remembrance and renewal are ever present. In each new cycle, generations were taught to recount the story of divine deeds. This way, parents would retell it to their children, who would in turn carry the tradition forward, passing down the significance of each feast and, consequently, the number 7 as a symbol of commitment to faith. This cycle of memory was, and still is, a way to keep the story alive and sacred. These feasts also teach us something practical, the importance of having special moments of pause, where celebration and reflection meet. In the fast pace of modern life, imagine dedicating some days of the year not only to rest but to give thanks, remember blessings, and connect spiritually. The sacred feasts of Israel serve as a reminder that life is not only about achievements and productivity, but about moments that celebrate what truly matters. Thus, the number 7 in the feasts is much more than a calendar. It's an invitation to live with a greater purpose. These celebrations remind us that time, when sanctified, carries a powerful meaning and that each pause is a chance to renew the spirit. The cycle of these feasts, held up by the number 7, prepares us for a life where the memory of divine acts is the foundation that sustains the entire journey. The 7 seals of Revelation. When we dive into the book of Revelation, the 7 seals emerge as one of the Bible's most complex and intriguing symbols. Each open seal represents a stage of revelation and judgment. These seals symbolize, in essence, the final steps of God's plan for humanity. As each seal is broken, we glimpse events that reveal both divine power and justice. In this context, the number 7 marks each stage decisively, demonstrating that the end of times also follows a cycle of completion, closing one era and preparing the ground for eternity. The 7 seals are also a call to discernment. Each seal brings to light spiritual and physical realities that, for many, can be disturbing. Imagine being in a dark room and, gradually, someone switches on a series of lights, revealing what was hidden. The symbolism of the seals is a bit like that. Each opening represents an awakening to what was once concealed. It's a process in which the number 7 acts as a countdown, guiding humanity through a journey of revelation where every stage has its purpose. These seals, however, are not only tied to judgment but also to the idea of hope. In Revelation, each stage is both a trial and a preparation. The 7 here reminds us that there is a greater purpose in God's plan and that even in tribulations, there is a divine direction. It's as if we're traveling along a path with ups and downs, but with the certainty that the end of this journey brings complete renewal. Just as the cycle of 7 invites us to move forward, the seals prepare us for a new beginning. Interestingly, these seals also represent different phases that, at some level, we all experience in life. Each brings a lesson, a revelation that, when applied to our daily lives, prompts us to reflect on what truly matters. Difficulties and trials often come to strengthen faith and resilience. The symbolism of the 7 seals is an invitation to embrace challenging moments as necessary stages for spiritual growth. When the final seal is opened, we enter a phase of redemption and rest, where the cycle is finally complete. This final act, filled with meaning, points to the hope of a new beginning, a rebirth that brings peace and redemption. The symbolism of the 7 seals, thus, leads us to consider what awaits when completeness is achieved, a profound sense of wholeness and divine harmony. Before we continue, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to be blessed with more videos to inspire your life. The 7 branches of the menorah. The 7-branch menorah is one of Judaism's oldest and most important sacred symbols. In the biblical tradition, it was commanded by God to Moses for placement in the tabernacle and later in the temple. Each of the 7 branches symbolizes an aspect of divine light that illuminates the world. As a source of light, the menorah represents God's presence among His people, radiating wisdom, guidance, and protection. When we think of the number 7, the menorah embodies completeness and holiness, as if each branch were a flame that fulfills the cycle of creation and spiritual understanding. The image of the menorah, with its 7 lamps, invites us to reflect on the importance of light in our lives. In the Bible, light is frequently used to represent knowledge and divine presence. We can think of it as a metaphor for our own search for clarity and understanding. After all, how many times, in the darkness of doubt or fear, do we seek a light to guide us? The 7 branches of the menorah remind us that, just as the darkness of the tabernacle was lit by a continuous flame, we too can seek this divine light to illuminate our own paths. In Jewish tradition, lighting the menorah's lamps wasn't a simple task. It was an act of reverence that required care and devotion. This ritual also shows us that spirituality requires dedication. Divine light isn't automatic. It needs to be nurtured continuously. Just as the menorah's lamps needed to be kept burning, our spiritual lives require daily care. Acts of kindness, prayer, and the pursuit of understanding are ways to keep this light alive. It's almost as if the number 7 in the menorah reminds us that our journey is constant and needs nurturing. Another fascinating aspect is the symbolism of unity that the menorah represents. Although there are 7 branches, they all arise from a single central stem. This detail teaches us about diversity and unity, that even with multiple expressions and paths, everything returns to one point: God's presence. In our lives, we can consider that, despite different talents and directions, all are part of a greater purpose. The menorah's central stem reminds us that, at heart, we all seek the same truth. The menorah also represents the triumph of light over darkness, a message as relevant today as it was in ancient times. We all face moments of darkness, doubts, fears, and uncertainties. The number 7 reminds us that there is a cycle for every phase, and that light, when maintained, always prevails. So we can imagine that, just as the menorah shone in the tabernacle, our faith can also be that continuous light that never goes out, even amid difficulties. Thus, the menorah's symbolism and the number 7 encourage us to nourish our own inner flame. Each of the 7 branches is like an aspect of our spiritual journey, and each flame reminds us that the path is sacred and that we're always seeking the light. This pursuit leads us to the next sacred mystery, where forgiveness also serves as a kind of light that frees us and allows us to move toward the divine purpose. Forgiveness and the cycle of 7. Matthew 18 verses 21 to 22. The concept of forgiveness is deeply intertwined with the symbolism of the number 7. In the Gospel of Matthew, when Peter asks Jesus how many times he should forgive his neighbor, Jesus' response is 70 times 7. This isn't an exact calculation, but a powerful metaphor for boundless forgiveness. This 7 times 7 cycle speaks to a form of completeness, where forgiveness isn't just a one-time act but a continuous, unconditional practice. Here, the number 7 acts as a bridge between the human and the divine, showing that true forgiveness has no end. Forgiving continually isn't easy, and Jesus knew that. However, forgiveness is a form of liberation for both the forgiver and the forgiven. Imagine the weight of carrying grudges, resentments, and grievances. The number 7 in this case represents a complete cycle of release, a process that allows us to let go of the past. To truly live in peace, we must forgive. With each 70 times 7, we release a part of ourselves still holding on to errors, whether our own or others. Forgiving is an act that closes a cycle of pain and opens one of peace. Forgiveness in the 7 cycle also teaches us about the importance of repetition and habit. Forgiving doesn't have to be just one big reconciliation. It can show up in small daily acts. It can be the act of letting go of a negative comment, giving a second chance, or even practicing compassion in common situations. The 7 reinforces that, with time and practice, forgiveness becomes more natural. Like a journey, each step is important and takes us a little further. This cycle also helps us understand that forgiveness is an expression of divine love. Jesus teaches that forgiveness is more than forgetting. It's making space for love to grow amid pain. Just as 7 represents a complete cycle, forgiveness is a path to complete healing, where every part, no matter how small, has its value. Forgiveness is a process that benefits everyone involved, like a light that, by illuminating others, also reflects back on the forgiver. To apply this teaching, a good practice would be to create a habit of intentional forgiveness. How about setting aside a moment at the end of the day to reflect on any grudges or negative feelings and consciously decide to forgive? Over time, this can become a routine that frees the heart. After all, if the number 7 teaches us anything, it's that each cycle deserves to be completed with integrity and peace. Thus, the forgiveness cycle that Jesus proposes with 70 times 7 reminds us that this practice is essential to a fulfilled life. Forgiveness is like a cycle that, when completed, renews our spirit. And in understanding this dynamic of release, we come to one of the greatest mysteries of 7. What happens when we reach the completeness of peace and reconciliation? The number 7 and God's complete work. At the end of this exploration, the number 7 emerges as a mark God uses to signal completeness, order, and a final purpose. In the biblical world, each cycle of 7 represents a step in realizing the divine will, whether in creation, celebrations, or forgiveness. It's as if God uses 7 to remind us that what He begins, He also completes. This sacred number wraps us in a cycle of beginning, middle, and end that reflects life's own rhythm, where all things pass and all things renew. The 7 represents this perfect harmony, a divine beat that connects the earthly to the eternal. This number is not merely mystical symbolism, it's a practical guide for our lives. Just as God rested on the 7th day, we are called to recognize cycles and respect our own rhythms. The 7 teaches us that life is not just about doing and producing, but also about celebrating, resting, and reflecting. This divine structure of the number 7 is a constant reminder that, like the physical world, the spiritual world also moves in cycles of completeness and renewal. Understanding this can transform how we relate to time, people, and faith itself. Each stage of the number 7, whether in the seals of Revelation or the branches of the menorah, is a chance to see that life is full of mysteries, but nothing is left to chance. Even in trials, the 7 teaches us that there is a purpose, a lesson. The highs and lows, challenges and moments of peace, all have their role in the divine cycle. And just as the Bible ends its final cycle in Revelation with new hope, our lives too follow this rhythm of endings and new beginnings. This profound understanding puts us in sync with what truly matters. So, the number 7 offers us more than symbolism. It shows us God's own nature, perfect, complete, faithful to His promises. When we look at the number 7 with these eyes, we understand that, like it, we are always in progress, moving toward completeness but also ready for new beginnings. The 7 is the cycle that closes to open new doors, and throughout the Bible, it reveals itself as the rhythm in which divine history unfolds. For us, it's an inspiration to live in harmony with this same sacred beat. Finally, reflecting on the number 7, we see that it invites us to a life full of meaning. It's a number that marks, yes, a closing, but that points to something greater, the eternal. Each 7 in the Bible is a note that integrates into the symphony of creation, a reminder that our journey is part of something vast, something that transcends time and space.